I'll speak very loud. Okay, hi, hello. Number one, it's a great pleasure to be here, and all I will say is just a few things from a very personal point of view, how my, I have to say, not very heavy involvement, but still involvement with this extraordinary project began. It began 2 years ago, and I was in Basel and looking at Il Tempo del Postino, I immediately flashed on Doug Aitken's presentation for the piece that I thought was the most extraordinary, the most theatrical, and I was sitting with, in fact, with a Greek friend next to me, and we said, oh, this would be so nice to see something like this in Athens. I think not only this, but I think it would be so great to have Doug's work be seen within a context that is not necessarily the art context, but also the theatrical and performing context. And this brought me to call my friend, and I have many thank you to give to everyone. My friend Yorgos Lukos, who's the artistic director of the Athens Festival, and I told him, we've seen something absolutely extraordinary, let me give you some tape, something to see, and Yorgos Lukos said, oh, this seems extraordinary to me too, let's do it. And at that point we had no idea what, when, where, and how. In the meantime, the Deste Foundation had, I think, approached Doug to do a project at the slaughterhouse in Hydra. So suddenly Doug was surrounded by all sides in Greece, and everybody seemed to say, this is fantastic, if something can take place and somehow connect the two projects, it would be great. And we worked together, and I have to say, and I have to give a special thank you at this point to the person who was my interface with the Deste Foundation, who's Marina Ramapuru, who is nothing short of fantastic. She is incredible, kind, precise, attentive, and a total pleasure to work with. Then, for a number of reasons that just, you know, cases of life, for a couple of months I was not really involved with the project. I followed it mostly through the mails that I received, so this is basically the structure and the reason why I'm here. Very kindly, Deste Foundation asked me to introduce Doug, which I'm doing now, but I'm sure everybody knows him, and eventually ask him one question or two. But I know that Doug is extraordinarily articulate and will not need my questions, but we might just use him as a bouncing board from which to start his extraordinary presentation, which is, by the way, and I'm sure you'll find it extraordinary, but it's 1/1,000,000th less extraordinary than the actual project, which is amazing. So, Doug, may I ask you to join me here, please? Continue, but and Doug, I'll just start with something. You read it from the beginning, and from there you take it on and leave from here. One of the reasons why I immediately jumped when I heard the first auctioneer is that in my long and model life, at one point I spent a long time in Alabama. Without getting too personal, I was dating a farmer, and she took me to cattle auctions, and I felt immediately at home. And I said, this is absolutely fantastic. I love it, I adore it, it's all the things that I wanted to hear, and if I may add, I also liked at one point, and I have to say this with a little shame, a song by a sort of country singer whose name was Leroy Van Dyke, who sang the Auctioneer Song in 1962, which was a success, and basically he talks like an auctioneer throughout the song. The song is not that great. There's one side which is really interesting, I'm going to mention in 1 second. Leroy Van Dyke, besides being the perfect clean-cut, unbelievable, perfect American young man from the 60s, also was a CIA operative. He was. And what was absolutely amazing is that I sensed underneath Leroy Van Dyke sort of like a dark underbelly, a black part, which to some extent might carry on into Doug's extraordinary performance, Deacon Theatre piece. Not necessarily because Doug is dark, but because Doug is deep. And whenever one digs deep, one finds darkness. And I think the title of the piece itself somehow is a homage to the dark side.
Yeah, I think hello, thank you for coming, everyone. It's a huge surprise to be here. And also, what can I say? Everyone that's helped out in this project, you know who you are, and I thank you immensely, immensely. The project that Paulo was talking about was from about 2 years ago, and there was a moment in time in Basel, Switzerland. There was some friends of mine put together an opera, and the opera was divided into different parts, maybe 10 or 12 different pieces, short pieces, and we all kind of created our own. It was almost like a short film, like a 10-minute piece, something like that. And when I had this challenge, how do you work with something live? How do you do something in a very traditional space, an opera hall, something that's kind of loaded with history? How do you make it speak to you? That's not my background. I don't create operas or anything like that. And I felt that it might be interesting to take this kind of large room with tiers of audience and just to have kind of a hostage situation, just to have this moment where suddenly the lights go out, the doors lock, and I wanted my performers to be real people in the audience, ushers, security guards, things like that. I didn't want to use the stage. I wanted to find a way to let reality seep in. So going back to what Paulo was talking about, because I know it was a little bit abstract, I wanted to work with rural farm auctioneers from America, and there was a kind of subculture of these people who it's all about buying and selling, and they've created this language which is incredibly fast. It's one of the fastest languages in the world. You think I'd talk fast right now? You should see these guys. So anyways, I kind of worked with the subculture, and I brought them into the opera, and I kind of had this situation where they sort of rose out of the audience, and it might be the person sitting next to you or the person that took you to the seat. And it kind of went into this polyphonic harmony. So I just want to kind of bring that back in for a second, because in a sense that was a bit of a starting point for this idea of doing something live and on film, which brings me to Greece right now. And the piece that we hope to present next week is titled Black Mirror. And Black Mirror is something which I like to think of it not as being any medium, not as being a thing of music or art or performance or architecture, but instead being an idea. And I'm very fascinated to see if an idea can have an energy that can allow it to kind of spread wide and free and kind of move through many different mediums and exist on one hand as something that's solid, that may be a physical body of work, and on the other hand, something that is ephemeral. It might be, 1 hour of time next week that we see in the harbor in Athens or on a barge off Hydra. So, anyways, we can talk about that a little bit more.
The piece, called a piece because, as you say, this idea started out and had a number of changes or mutations. As you advanced, I think you possibly, I'm not saying exactly change the subject matter, but you may render it more abstract and
Yeah.
at the same time focusing more on aspects which were not strictly narrative.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this piece and how it is structured? And
Right. Well, I think Black Mirror came out of a kind of recognition that things are changing, and things are changing rapidly. How we communicate with each other, how we send messages, how we live, how we kind of live in an uprooted nomadic way, how we kind of send information, how language has been condensed to short phrases that you might text to one another. And I became increasingly aware of this, and I could kind of see that it almost seemed like the landscape was becoming a cloud. And you had the physical world, the geographic world, whether that's Greece or England or America, these kind of continents and cities and communities, but you also have this kind of cloud that's moving around the world. And this cloud is made up of exchanges and information, and it's a kind of dematerial place, which is somehow connecting and allowing us to move, even if we don't move physically or geographically. So I wanted to really take this idea of a kind of distinctly modern condition and how we're kind of coming into this, and I wanted to use that as a cornerstone for this work. But what I just mentioned is obviously a very abstract idea. It's something that you can't really go forward and make a piece of artwork very easily about. So I felt like I needed to kind of pull it back, and I needed to create a human story with it. So the piece really started to create shape and form and a kind of momentum as we started taking this idea, this, I guess, philosophy or set of questions, and to kind of move into the world, and we started filming it initially.
So the piece is also articulated into two fundamental parts. I think one is the part that will take place in the boat, in the barge, and the part that will take place in the slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how these two parts interact?
Yeah, very much. Well, I think in my in my time visiting Greece, I was very interested in two components of Greek history. One is the narrative, the idea of mythology, storytelling, and the narrative. The other thing that really struck me was this notion of trade routes and distribution. And I started thinking about these things, and the idea of narrative has always been very essential to my work. I've always felt that, is there a way to tell a different kind of story? Is there a way to open up the story, the straight story? We look at literature, and you can read something from page 1 to 200, and it might take you there. But then you read something by James Joyce, and it's a huge cycle. It's a broken pieces of experiences. And I think that we've kind of shifted throughout the decades and centuries from storytelling to different forms of art, whether that's theater or opera. Eventually, in the 20th century, cinema became the dominant language. But I've always felt this restlessness with these things, and I felt that maybe there's some other way to break that, to make something that is maybe more accurate to the human experience, or at least my experience, because I can only really speak autobiographically. And so many of the works that I've made, I'll just kind of flip through these, have been investigations into these ideas. This is a work titled Electric Earth that I just kind of popped on, because I see Autumn here. And Jeffrey, who we both had a...
Which we showed here 4 years ago.
Fabulous. So just kind of going back and talking about this piece for a minute, because it allows me to kind of come into the subject. Electric Earth was a work which it followed one individual, this young man. He's kind of falling asleep watching television. He wakes up, walks outside, and it's as if he were the last person on Earth. There's kind of nothing around him except for gas pumps moving or numbers on signs counting down, street lights pulsing, and it's this kind of landscape of electricity. And within the work, this character kind of finds himself caught between keeping up and barely keeping up, and at other moments synchronizing perfectly with the moment. With this work, I opted to break away from the single screen. I wanted to create an environment, something the viewer could walk into. One room led to another, so it was almost as if you were going through different chapters or passages in this person's day or whatever period of time it kind of occupied. So in this work also it was very important to kind of utilize architecture and make architecture a proactive element and simultaneously to try to open up sound and moving image. Something that was a kind of sequence landscape. So I'll just flash through a few of these. I kind of dropped into these slides with no specific order, so it's a little bit like we're talking about. It's a non-linear moment. But around the same time that I had made Electric Earth, I was supposed to do something for the Venice Biennale, and the curator at the time, Harold Seaman, he said, you know, come up with some ideas and let me know. We'll work this out. And I became frustrated with this idea of one idea. It seemed so stupid that you would have one idea and you do it. So I kind of, I got the studio and a bunch of jugs of water, and I stayed in the studio for a long period of time, like 2 or 3 weeks or something. And I tried to make 3 ideas a day, 3 complete ideas a day that were like fleshed out. And at first it was very difficult because you're trying to kind of get these concepts out of your system, you're trying to make sense of it. And eventually the ideas became more radical and more liberated, and you would just see one thing moving to another. It was almost like a kind of dormant muscle in your mind. But this was one of them. I had some kind of idea that I would swim to Venice, Italy from Los Angeles, but obviously that wasn't really possible. I'm not in very good shape. So a year or so later I swam the Panama Canal. So this goes from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. Different pieces. I like to work in many mediums. I don't really feel defined by any medium, photography or film or anything like that very much. This was an exhibition. This was another work where the subject of this work was this a kind of part of the day of this young girl who's kind of like really coming to life. She's like 12 years old and everything's new, everything's visceral, and she lives in a suburban home. So we kind of built a suburban structure in Germany at a museum, and here you see her. Inside, it's these different, inside becomes a psychological space almost. And eventually she lives out this afternoon, she falls asleep, and while she's asleep, the house that she's in is severed from its foundation, hoisted up, put on a truck, and it kind of disappears down the freeway at nighttime with her sleeping inside. It made sense. But I'll just kind of blaze through these because there's a piece titled Blow Debris, New Skin. This was an exhibition at the Serpentine Gallery in London, and when I was, how did I do this? Oh, there we go. When I was asked to do a project there, it was always a space that I liked very much as a viewer. It's a very beautiful space to see, like paintings or flat work. It has a kind of pastoral quality, and I couldn't quite figure out how it would work for me. And I guess I thought about it. I thought about the idea of, could we turn the entire space into this kind of landscape? And the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of activate the turret so it became this searchlight, like a lighthouse that ran on solar energy at nighttime. And then inside I wanted to cut a hole in the floor. So when you walk in the entrance, instead you step down underground, and there's these kind of subterranean installations in the heating and cooling room for Hyde Park, and you kind of surface into the space. It was a work that kind of used landscape. As the work traveled, each museum it went to, it changed configuration completely. I wanted to just keep remixing the work and adding new components. I like that idea that something doesn't stay the same, and I think that that's something that museums really need to embrace, is that idea of a continuous progression. That I like to see art as something that's living, not static or fixed. So this is a book. I love books, and I passed a bookstore here that was just wonderful. But I was going to do a book, and I thought it'd be interesting to do a film that only existed as a book. This is the German actor Udo Kier, and we kind of made this story of a businessman who travels so much that he eventually is kind of every place and nowhere simultaneously. One night he falls asleep and wakes up and he's become this hotel room. So it became this strange object. This is a secession museum in Vienna, and it's a space that I've always absolutely loved. And did this exhibition there, and I asked them what time it closed, and they said, oh, well, it opens at 10 in the morning and closes at 5 at night. And I felt kind of frustrated by this, that maybe the museum should never sleep. So when the exhibition inside would shut down, the outside would open up, and we shot, I think, 3,000 eyes sleeping and waking, one to another. And it was kind of the first opportunity I had to kind of use the moving image outside and to try to kind of work with it a different way. These are just quick images of the inside. This was a piece at Mies van Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion. I had the opportunity to do something there, and I just couldn't bring myself to make something visual. I think the space is so it's so minimal, it's so elegant in a certain way that I wanted to use sound. So this is a mobile that, as it rotates, every section of it is a different conversation. So it's continuously rotating with this very specific fragments of conversation. So it's kind of almost going back to that idea of storytelling. Can you make something that's broken and fragmented that everyone can experience in their own way, that's personalized? Well, I'll tell you guys this later. This was, I thought I wanted to make a city, so we made this city out of FedEx boxes. And, pardon? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I kind of turned my studio into an architecture model workshop for 3 or 4 months or something. And we made these kind of aviary for birds that was based on utopian and fascist and brutalist architecture. And the amazing thing about this is you can call, I don't know if it's like this in Athens, but you can call FedEx and they bring boxes to your house. So the materials were free and they'd actually deliver it, which I kind of loved. So, other projects, that was something in France.